the leaders all agree we're going to launch this new product. But if they're all in different systems, then the sales teams want to start calling customers, and they may call a customer who just got off the phone with an account manager who just had a meeting with them. And that customer was just telling the account manager how upset they are with the current product that they're using because there's some bugs in it. When the customer's like, I cannot believe you're trying to sell me something right now. Your product isn't working. And then the next day, that same customer receives a marketing email about this new product. And they're like, this company doesn't know what they're doing. They're totally not aligned.
You're listening to RevOps Champions, a podcast created for B2B leaders to help you align your people, streamline your processes, trust your data, and leverage technology in order to grow your business. We're your hosts, Brendan Denewell
and Amy Weaver. On today's episode, we chat with Michael Ewing about how to leverage data and technology to make better business decisions and scale your go-to-market teams. We start off by getting his take on the role of RevOps in creating alignment between sales, marketing, and customer service.
A lot of companies, I guess, they think about it as sales operations and just setting up, get prospects and CRM set up and forecasting. Don't think about connecting the commercial engine with the billing engine, and even less companies think about connecting, customer data, like usage outcomes, and in customer interactions like marketing, like email consumptions and email campaigns, CSMs interactions, sales interactions, like to not have those pieces connected makes it really challenging when you want to start to grow your customer base, or just report on your customer base and report on the healthiness of it. But then you really start to run into roadblocks when you want to invest in strategic plays that will help grow your customers. Let's say you have a new product that you're releasing and you want to coordinate marketing, sales, and customer success efforts. Well, if those three teams are working in three different silos, well, it becomes really difficult to really coordinate those things.
If they're in three different silos, and if you're only associating the revenue piece with sales, because I think to your point of most people think of it as sales operations, I think it's easy to make the connection between a sales organization and the revenue that they contribute to the business.
Sure.
But you also have to give credit where it's due to those other functions that are involved.
There's so many steps that happen before the sale.
And after.
And to really have like an integrated campaign for like a new product, so to continue on that thread for a second, you probably want to have coordinated marketing efforts where you're going to have emails that will go out to customers, social posts, events. Maybe there's specific customers you're going to have case studies for. You have like a marketing team that does those, and they're going to have their own KPIs they're looking at to see whether those campaigns were successful. And a lot of their goals, their end goal may be revenue, like how many new customers do we get? But there's going to be benchmarks to see if that marketing campaign was successful, such as open rates or interactions on social posts. And same thing with the customer success team. Well, if you have this great team that's talking to your customers on a regular basis, don't you want them to maybe talk about your new products? Wild.
Revolutionary.
They're not just, if they're only measured on customer retention, and you don't think about them in your integrated campaign, then you're really missing out on that group. And then finally, you have the sales team who's, getting those leads that would come from the customer success team and come from the marketing team and come from the product team as well, doing some PLG. They're getting those leads and now they're kind of executing on that sale. Well, if all they see in their CRM system is like, hey, a new lead wants to talk to me. Well, a good salesperson is going to ask, well, what are they interested in? Why are they interested in it? How do they get to me? What's the data points? and they can be able to leverage that in their calls. And RevOps enables all that. RevOps is the glue that brings all of those go-to-market functions together.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Anyway, so as we're chatting with different folks about it, they're like, oh well, this is kind of how our marketing functions, and this is the data that marketing is responsible for, and these are the processes that we use in marketing, and then this is the data that sales is tracking and being kept accountable for, and these are the processes that we use for sales, and these are the tools that marketing uses, these are the tools that sales uses, and then they keep going, and the customer service team, this is what they do, and then so ultimately you're like, okay, so marketing has they're responsible for this particular data.
Mm-hmm.
They know they're being successful if they're achieving those metrics, which are then being handed over to sales. Sales is then being held accountable to achieving their KPIs.
Mm-hmm.
The same thing with service, and it's like, yeah, that's how we're doing it. I'm like, okay, well, that's RevOps. That's so the question then is, if you're doing RevOps to 50, 60, 70, 80% of efficacy, the question is, like, if you just make one or two improvements, what would that look like?
Yeah. Yeah. Or especially, as companies are scaling back on their headcount and looking to become more efficient, you need to look at your tech stack. And if 3 different departments are using 3 different technologies, so it becomes incredibly inefficient. If marketing team is using Marketo and sales team is using Salesforce, but they're not connected, and the customer success team is maybe using Gainsight or
Zendesk or something,
just not using anything.
Yeah.
If you don't connect all those together, then it becomes really difficult to scale.
Right. Yeah, because the data is not flowing from one to the next, and there's not one single source of truth, right, as we talk about.
Right. And the cost of maintaining each of those systems can start to become pretty exuberant. And there's definitely all-in-one platforms out there that can bring those groups together. So that's where RevOps, I think, really starts to shine, is when you put a roof over sales ops, marketing ops, services ops, and you just put it all under one umbrella of revenue operations.
Yeah. Love it. Good stuff.
Let's go back through your story. I like when we talked about you opening the office in Dublin, and you got to take a playbook that had been built for the inbound marketing consultants when you first started at HubSpot, but it had become a little bit bloated, you described, and sort of reinventing that playbook for onboarding customers to get a quick ramp up and for them to see the value of HubSpot sooner.
Yeah, absolutely. Maybe I'll talk a little bit about my journey and kind of get into, I have some lessons learned about scaling headcount, scaling internationally, implementing a new function like renewals, and implementing a department like customer revenue.
Yeah, because I mean, essentially, like, what we're always trying to get at is why do some companies scale better and faster than others when they seemingly seem to, to your point, have the same headcount, they have access to the same funding, they have access to the same tools. So why are some companies or organizations scaling more effectively than others?
Yeah, it's a great question. I don't know the answer. But I've had some experiences. I've kind of seen the show a few times, and I can at least tell you what I've seen. Well, one of the lessons that I learned from launching the HubSpot's Dublin office, it's our first international office. We had a small team of expats that went over to help launch that office, and I was responsible for leading our implementation team, finding implementation specialist and onboarding customers in a efficient fashion. And I view this as a really well-funded startup.
Okay.
Where we could be really agile and experiment and take some risks and try some different things. And the way that I viewed it, setting up that department there, was to take the best of the playbook that we had built in the U.S. and implement those strategies and kind of leave the worst behind, some of the things that may bog us down or created some inefficiencies. And so I ended up implementing the kind of two examples is the primary way that we were onboarding customers. The US was a time-based approach where you got an inbound marketing consultant. We would spend 4 to 6 or 8 hours with you and just help you kind of whatever you needed. We'd help you be very, very open of whatever challenges your business had. We'd help you solve them, primarily using the HubSpot tool. And I started to take more of a campaign-based approach where I'd be asking customers to think about a campaign that they wanted to use with HubSpot, and that would incorporate all the tools together as opposed to just like kind of a one-off, like I just want to use email marketing. I'd say, well, let's talk about what your primary goal is. If it's to generate more leads, well, then let's use social media, email marketing, an offer with a landing page, call to action, kind of string all the tools together. And I did that through a project management approach using Basecamp way back in the day, and created some project-based, onboarding that was focused around campaigns. And that was being able to do that. I guess anybody could do it, but being kind of separated from the mothership was a little bit easier for us to experiment using those different tactics, and we got to see whether it worked or not and show the results. And we ended up, seeing some pretty great results, and then taking those systems and processes back to the US and then implementing those fully. And I think that's what kind of enables some companies to be more successful than others is, one, experimenting, being open to trying new things, always testing and validating whether something's being successful or not. And then if something is deemed a success, then you fully look at what the systems and processes and operations are, and then actually integrate that, and don't just staple it on to your current system. Actually, let's revamp our current operating model. And then companies that do that continuously innovate and kind of disrupt themselves, I feel like those are the ones that are able to kind of scale more efficiently.
So you did know the answer, Sneaky.
Yeah,
it's hard. It's I guess easy thing to say, and it's hard to do.
Well, and it probably looks different across different organizations.
Yeah, exactly. And there's timing and people, and but I think that's the framework that I at least have in my mind of being able to scale internationally. At least that's worked for me.
Yeah. I mean, a lot of it is also, I'm learning a lot more still, at my age about strategy and being like what strategic really means. And actually, one of the cool things that happened to me, early as a HubSpot partner, I ended up by accident in a training session in Cambridge, Massachusetts, where Brian Halligan was actually the person, sort of doing the training. And one of the things he was telling us was strategy is as much knowing what to do as what not to do. Mm-hmm. And I think you just alluded to this idea of iterating, and I've since learned that being really smart and being strategic is about iterating, and it's again revisiting, removing all the common biases that we're all exposed to, Like that. Jeff Bezos, I think, is very famous for one of those biases, which is just because it worked yesterday, it doesn't mean it's going to work today, right? And which so at Amazon they call it every day is day one, because and he said this right within the first year or two of launching Amazon, that Amazon probably wouldn't be around by 2030 because that they would get lazy and comfortable, and they would stop innovating and stop iterating, and someone else would be planning to take them down from the garage. But when you break it down, so you always hear these great big success stories around how strategic people and leaders have been. But when you really break it down, it's into those little things, like every day, what's working, what's not working, what's working, what's not working, and then to your point, get rid of the stuff that's not working and do more of the stuff that is working. Right?
Omissions was always a really big part of the HubSpots. Like every year we would have something we call M spots. It's kind of goals that we would set as an organization. Every department would eventually you develop an M spot, and the O stands for omissions. And there's so many great ideas. There's so many things you can do, and it's I think it's the best organizations like Amazon and Microsoft and Facebook and Google. They really encourage innovation and people to bring forward all of their ideas. And you can't do them all. And I think that's where strategy really comes in, and some of the best leaders are able to make the big bets and pick one or two things that they're really going to focus on. And that's hard. I think that's a really hard thing to do, is to really hard decisions to say, like, there's extremely good ideas that we think that could be very viable, but we're going to have to omit them because we're going to focus on this, and we're going to do this thing really well.
And if you have data points, for instance, like the one your colleague recognized, where some revenue was being left on the table by HubSpot not actively sort of upselling, if you will, when customers were going beyond their contact tier, it's an easier sell internally to point to that data and say, this is something worth going after, and I just need the resources or the time or the whatever. And that helps you sort through all of those brilliant ideas and say, this is a brilliant idea and it's going to lead to revenue. So let's move forward with that.
It's data. You have to speak in data. I know Amazon implemented something that we use at Impact before every kind of QBR or kind of any sort of big meeting. You would write up a document that was like a pre-read document that everybody would read for 15 or 20 minutes before the meeting actually started. And the purpose behind this was to kind of cut through the selling that some people are actually really good at presenting their ideas. They're very persuasive in their delivery, and to cut through that and really just present their story with data. And yeah, I think there's something to that of when you can really find your problem with, especially a revenue related problem. You can point to the data to say, here's the revenue that's being leaked, and here's why I think it's leaking, and here are some solutions to address that leak. Well, that's a much more powerful argument than compelling. I really think we should XYZ.
Yes, much more compelling.
If you can prove the ROI, absolutely, yeah. So data, of course, is a big topic that we talk about a lot. Anyone working in RevOps is going to be talking about data. There's, I think, and then another big trend that we've also talked about, and that we talk about pretty much every day, is it's becoming a lot more leaders and people working in various RevOps roles, whether it's sales ops, marketing ops, service ops, are realizing that more data isn't necessarily better data.
The flip side to the coin.
Right. What is your experience on, like, how do you end up with the right data, whether it's more or less, it doesn't really matter, but making sure that it's the right data that'll help, leadership of any, at any level, any department, be, enable them to make the best decisions faster.
Sure. Yeah. Taking a pause because it's I'm like really trying to think if more data is worse. I think that it really comes down to structured data and really knowing what your problem is, and then being able to look at accurate data to help address or answer your problem. So, for example, I've found that unified databases matter like a lot. Of getting a data lake where you can sync in multiple distinct databases is something that not a lot of companies do. But the more it's, as people realize the importance of it, obviously, like Snowflake and these sort of data lakes are very popular. So the larger companies obviously are. But a lot of smaller companies that are starting or maybe starting to scale, they haven't thought about combining their distinct databases. So, having customer data, commercial data, billing data, like if you go ask like why, like what's driving, what, even a simpler question, what's our net dollar retention rate? And if you have your commercial engine in, say, Salesforce, and you have your billing engine in, say, NetSuite, if those two don't speak to each other, then your finance team may go pull the results from NetSuite from your billing engine, and your commercial engine is, since it's not speaking to the billing engine, like they may know that customers have churned or like have downgraded or have just upsold, but it's not a real-time sync to your billing engine. So then so they pull just from the finance engine, well, that net dollar retention rate is going to be different than what your commercial engine says. So, and that's just one example of like needing to have those two databases, synced and talking to each other. And to me, it's like not how much data you have, because you could have, trillions of data points in both engines, but you just need them to be, you need to match them. Mm-hmm. They need to be correct. And then it becomes an exercise of, knowing what you're measuring and how to measure it properly. Because, looking at the net dollar retention rate as just an example is going to be, it tells a different story than looking at the gross dollar retention rate. So if you're just looking to see how healthy are your customers, well, I mean, it's two very distinctly different numbers. But one will show that customers are how much you're retaining only customers if they're downgrading or churning, and the other is going to show like how much you're able to upsell and scale with your customer basis and to mitigate that churn. So it's like knowing which data points to measure, and then the inputs that go into each of those. So what is driving gross dollar retention rate? What are the activities that are leading to customers to downgrade or churn more? And that's where having another database connected, like your customer success database, where you can see interactions that are happening with customers, a frequency of QBRs. You could have contextual notes or ratings that the customer success managers are giving, customer health scores. If you have all that in a database and you can now sync that up to the commercial and billing engine, well, now you can start to answer those questions of like, what are the early indicators that are driving churns or downgrades? And then that helps you to answer your gross dollar retention rate.
Yeah. It's which is I think that was a really good example of which kind of goes back to what we were talking about before, where it's, we talked about marketing, they have to have their KPIs and metrics, and those are the ones that they should be focused on. So whether it's 3, 5, or 10, data points or metrics or KPIs that they're tracking on a daily, weekly, quarterly basis, that they should only be looking at those numbers and not being concerned about data that's irrelevant to those numbers, right? The same way that a sales team has to be focused on theirs, the customer service team needs to be focused on theirs, but they all the flow of the data has to make sense from an organizational perspective based on the overall objectives of the business, right? One of the other trends that we've seen in the conversations we've been having in the last few weeks, again, we're talking about RevOps, and we're speaking to a lot of revenue leaders or people that are on the revenue side of the business. But one of the common things that people are talking about is how, let's just call it the CRO, so the revenue leader, and the CFO should really be able to work very, very closely together.
Sure.
And the example you just gave now of the commercial engine and the billing engine is a perfect example of that, because they both need access to all the data in real time, and there's no reason that shouldn't be happening today. The technology exists for every CFO, every CRO, and every other leader in any business to have access to all the relevant data in real time.
That's right. If the CFO is only reporting results and not forecasting, then you have a serious problem.
Right.
And you're not going to be able to forecast without the commercial engine.
Correct. Yeah, I mean, the conversation we had on Tuesday actually specifically mentioned, FP&A, which, again, most people on the revenue side of the business don't even know what FP&A means. But every CFO, that is what they live by, is they need to be able to forecast and plan and analyze the data, so you can do, 24-month, 36-month, 60-month, roll forwards and what have you. But if you're not working with first of all, if you don't have access to the data and it's not accurate, then it's not all that helpful.
Yeah. Well, oftentimes I guess you see no finance team worth their salt is going to be just forecasting results. They're always going to be forecasting. Like, that's part of the function. I guess like what I meant to say is those forecasts become without just looking at trends, if you can actually take the inputs from the commercial side, becomes more accurate. And that's where I think HubSpot was extremely good at forecasting, and they continue to be. They know down to the penny where their forecast is going to, where their sales is going to be. A quarter, 2 quarters, 3 quarters away. It's scary how accurate it is. And a lot of it's because of that really tight integration between sales, marketing, and customer success.
Mm-hmm. And then, of course, the CFO having visibility. To be able to do that.
Yeah, absolutely. The CFO and the CRO kind of working really hand in hand. 100%.
Amy, what else do we have that we wanted to make sure we covered with Michael?
We hit on data as an asset. We hit on data as a liability.
Although we could probably talk about those for a couple of hours each.
Yeah, I mean, we could go back through. There's nothing keeping us from talking about what Frank Ogre did to connect your sales ops to your customer success ops, kind of bridging those two components of RevOps together.
Sure. Yeah. Frank Ogre is he's a brilliant leader. I'm not going to be able to tell his story as well as he deserves. So maybe reach out to him for a next interview.
Actually, that's a good idea.
He's be able to tell way better stories than I can. But from my recollection, Frank, HubSpot was going through a big transformation. We had made a big bet. Brian Darmesh and the leadership team made a big bet that we were going to move off of Salesforce and we're going to eat our own dog food and build. We're going to move on to HubSpot's CRM. And the HubSpot CRM was not built for enterprise businesses. It was built for small, medium-sized businesses. So for an organization like HubSpot had grown up to that point and have 5,000, I want to say around 3,000 to 5,000 employees at that time. That was a big switch. And Frank was tasked with building out what they called the business enablement team. And Frank hired a bunch of essentially RevOps teams, team members, individual contributors, and leaders to really build a system design and infrastructure that could be able to move HubSpot off of Salesforce and onto HubSpot. And that there was hundreds of millions of dollars of investment that went into that. And without building those train tracks for like that, the guts of that system, it would have been disastrous for HubSpot to move off Salesforce. I think it's just really great leadership and talking about strategy earlier, really strategic thinking, knowing that this isn't going to be a 1 year plan to migrate off. We're going to plan this to be 3 years, and we're really going to put in the system and operation muscle behind it and lean in more to that than just throwing people at a problem.
Yeah, that's actually a really great reminder, because I remember, of course, we remember that happening, but of course, we didn't see it from the inside like you did. But even from the outside, it was a big deal. But now, I'm guessing that's like maybe 8 or 9 years ago, or it seems like a long time ago. But
getting old.
Yeah, and
feels like yesterday.
Yeah, throw COVID in there, and who knows how long it was. But the reality is that when it was doesn't really matter. But what you're seeing now, of course, is as HubSpot has made this very, very successful, at least the beginnings of a successful shift up market into the mid-market space, where you now have many other companies that are the size of HubSpot was then, using HubSpot as the solution to run their RevOps, whether they call it RevOps or not. With an all-in-one platform, a single source of truth, or the single pane of glass, as I guess you and many others were.
That's one of my mentors told me that, the single pane of glass. I think it's a great analogy.
Yeah, we've been hearing that a lot in the last couple of weeks. The single pane of glass. So it's just because now we're actually, at Dynamico, we're now implementing the HubSpot CRM for those mid-market companies. So I'm really glad you reminded me about, HubSpot essentially did that to themselves, or for themselves first, making that shift from Salesforce to HubSpot. And so, because we're seeing that happening a lot, companies, again, in that mid-market, so let's say up to about 2,000 employees, moving from Salesforce or Microsoft to HubSpot, because it's an easier platform to adopt, train on, much higher usability, etc. And you mentioned something else earlier about the cost of. So if you're using Salesforce, for example, you have a very expensive, relatively speaking, team who has to continue to cobble all those systems together, so that you have an integrated system where the data can flow freely and is available in real time to all managers and leaders.
Well, would this be a good time to talk about, having gone through that transition yourself, while internal to HubSpot? Are there some things that companies who are doing that today should look out for and avoid in that process? Sort of building upon like having that business enablement team in place. What might that look like?
Yeah. Well, and one thing I wanted to make sure I just mentioned on this topic is just to be prepared for growing system complexity. With every new hire and every new team that you bring on, especially a new team that you bring on, it brings more complexity to the operating system. And oftentimes there's demand for new tools, new fields, new workflows, and it just causes the complexity of your systems to grow. And I think maybe that's a common mistake that companies will make, is not being prepared for that and not thinking ahead to staffing or just putting adequate resources to their revenue operations teams.
And that's of course, and that's all separate from the tech bloat issue, which is a whole nother issue, right?
Yeah.
Yeah, that's really interesting. Yeah.
Yeah. So speaking from experience and seeing HubSpot kind of go through that motion, it goes back to the Frank Azure the business enablement team. It's not just Frank. Frank was in charge of it at the time, and there's brilliant people that really made that happen. They really invested in the tools to be successful, kind of thought ahead. But not fully. You can never fully anticipate things. And we didn't build out everything perfectly either. There's a lot of things that we didn't have right when we first launched, and then over the years that we built. As an example, I helped to build the renewal management team at HubSpot. I was one of the first founding members of that team. And I was brought on more as a program manager, where I worked with director, a gentleman named Derek Roberts, who led renewals at Salesforce and kind of had this playbook that he brought over and helped to bring to HubSpot. And Derek, when we're implementing a new system, a new department, I think this talks to revenue operations a lot. Derek, the way he set it up, he was the director. He hired a system architect, one of the first hires that he brought on. Hired a data analyst, and hired a people manager, and then hired me as a program manager to kind of coordinate all the trains. And having that specialty of a system architect that's able to look at the broader picture of like what systems do we have today and how would this new system fit in, and like minor decisions can turn out to have very large impact of on your systems. So having somebody that knows the full picture and can that's what they focus their time on, that can really help reduce operational inefficiencies and make your project successful. So an analogy that I was thinking of preparing for this interview today is think of your operating system like a garden that needs to be maintained and pruned. So be ready to invest more time or resources if you're adding if you're growing tomatoes and you're all of a sudden going to start growing watermelons.
Planting new things.
You better be prepared for learning how to care and grow watermelons, which is different than being able to grow tomatoes. And then you have to prune your garden. You can't just let it grow wild. Your weeds will grow, and so you have to constantly clean your system. Delete the bloat. I think it's what you mentioned earlier there. Reduce, audit your fields that you have, audit your workflows, audit your systems, and do that on a quarterly basis. That's really ideal.
Yeah, that's a great analogy to kind of simplify it. Of course, but on the other hand, though, the challenge and of course the irony that we all have being in the technology space, though, is one of the reasons that we have to make a lot of assumptions planning these things is because the technology itself is continuously evolving, and we don't know what it's going to be able to do, in 6 months or 12 months from now. And of course, with everyone talking about AI at the moment, you'd have to believe that the rate of that, or the velocity of change, is going to continue to increase. Like it wasn't,
Sure.
it was already at breakneck speed, going into COVID. Now it's whatever you call that, new speed.
The speed of light.
Right. So here we're all sort of, at the coal face or the cutting edge of trying to figure this all out. But it's just so ironic that the technology that we're implementing itself is going to be better than it is today in probably weeks from now.
Yeah.
And
which goes even more to the need of a strong RevOps team. And having a strong leader in your RevOps team that can be thinking ahead, to the future, staying on the cutting edge of the existing technologies that they're using, and being on the lookout for new ones.
Takes a proactive kind of person.
Sure. Yeah. Proactive sort of person, and one that listens to, I think it's really important to listen to your team. Like regularly speak to your counterparts in sales and services and marketing and product and finance. What are the challenges that they're facing? What tools are they, like, how are they using the tools today? Are they finding deficiencies in them? If they heard of any new tools that they want to explore? I think it's really important to be tuned in to those conversations, as opposed to having a more reactive approach where your CRO might bring you to say, hey, I want to implement outreach when I'm using SalesOft today. Like, well, okay, tell me more about why. Being a partner with those different, with all the go-to-market functions, can help with the technology, the speed of acceleration that technology is happening. Because you can, again, be aware of all the needs that they're having, and if you're really tuned in to the capabilities of the current software you're using and the new ones that are out there, you can be more
aligned in your thinking
about deploying new things.
Yeah. This is making me think of Brendan Channing Farrer's analogy of the people rowing in the boat, and everyone's aligned and they're rowing in the same direction, going the same pace. They're going to move forward a lot quicker than people who are moving their oars separately.
Yeah, that's a super analogy. Dharmesh is the first one I heard that from. Dharmesh said a little bit differently of vectors aligning. Yes. I think he mentioned it from Elon Musk said, your company is the sum of all vectors. And if your vectors aren't aligned, then your company's not going to be as efficient as it should be. So I like Channing's twist on that a lot. It's all the people in the boat need to be rowing in the same direction. If you have somebody that's always rowing left and the other guy's always rowing right, well, you're just going to go in circles.
Yeah. I do love that analogy, but I think one of the things that I'm realizing as I'm listening to you is, with as a RevOps team and a RevOps leader, you're not just aligning the people to all row in the same direction. You also have to make sure that the data is always aligned. You have to make sure that the technology is always nurtured and pruned along the way. So I think it's those are all fantastic analogies, but ultimately the RevOps leader is responsible for aligning the people, which is the ones in the boat, but that they also have to be always on top of making sure we're tracking and following and I guess getting the results for the right data, and then the continuous, your garden sort of pruning analogy of making sure that you always have the technology stack or systems optimized, that they don't get too bloated, or that they're not anemic, and aren't able to do what the teams need the technology to do.
So to tie this all back together, Brendan, if kind of what we talked about earlier is launching a new product, like kind of launching a cross-sell product. And the leaders can have the people kind of working, rowing together. But the systems aren't aligned, and like we said, you're kind of going in circles. So here's a really good example. The leaders all agree we're going to launch this new product, and this CS team is going to talk to our customers about it. The sales team is going to call our customers, and the marketing team is going to email our customers. They all agree, right? So everybody's agreed. We're all aligned. But if they're all in different systems, then the sales team's going to start calling customers, and they may call a customer who just got off the phone with an account manager who just had a meeting with them, and that customer was just telling the account manager how upset they are with the current product that they're using because there's some bugs in it.
Yeah.
The sales rep doesn't know though, because they're not in the same system. So they're calling this customer, and the customer's like, I cannot believe you're trying to sell me something right now. Your product isn't working. And then the next day, that same customer receives a marketing email about this new product, and they're like, this company doesn't know what they're doing.
Yeah,
they're totally not aligned.
Yeah, unsubscribe potentially.
Yeah.
Oh,
yeah.
I'm cringing. I'm cringing.
That's a really good example, though. Yeah. Awesome. Well, Michael, well, first of all, thanks again so much for joining us.
Yeah. Absolutely.
Do you have any sort of last, I guess, if you could speak to our audience and who again are all folks who are trying to figure out, some version of whatever they're responsible for within the RevOps operations, whether it's in marketing or marketing ops or sales ops or service ops.
Mm-hmm.
What is one piece of advice from your experience specifically that you'd like to share with everybody?
Oh man. I guess it's just keep learning, because there's just the technology is advancing so quickly. So stay up to date on the new technology. But I guess what I mean more thoroughly is like find mentors, find other peers in your industry, and speak to them, connect with them, understand what their challenges are, how they're solving them, and don't work in a silo. There's actually a lot of people around you that are facing similar challenges, and broaden your network and broaden your mind by thinking more take a wider lens approach to solving problems by learning and by connecting with others.
Awesome. I love that.
You love relationships.
It's all about people. It does come down to people first. I have a friend of mine, Mark Killens, is really he launched a network called TAC recently, and it's people first motion. And one of the things that really stuck with me in my sales career is a mentor once told me, as you're selling products to someone, you need to think about how it's going to affect them personally. Because oftentimes you're really selling to another person, but that person has a career at the company that you're selling to. And how are you helping them further their career?
Mm-hmm.
And that's always stuck with me. So whatever kind of function you're working in, you're talking to somebody else in the company, like remember, you're talking to a person, not to a company.
Yeah.
And thinking really about how you can really help them,
yes,
further themselves, and what are their personal challenges they're having, their career challenges they're having. I think that frame of mind can kind of unlock some new ways of thinking.
Yeah, I love that. That's really good.
What a great nugget of wisdom to end on, I think.
Yeah, really good. Michael, well, thanks again. I'm sorry we kept you a little over time here, and that we got started a little late, but it was really cool to see you again.
Yeah.
We did speak to John earlier too, and we told him we'd tell you we say hi, or he says hi.
Yeah, definitely reciprocate, please. And maybe it's a little call to action for myself. I love talking go-to-market strategy and the importance of implementing RevOps to drive sustainable growth. So if you're listening to this, please connect with me on LinkedIn. I'd love to chat. Just shoot me a message, and love to have a virtual coffee chat with you anytime. If you're in the Boston area, then maybe we can meet up.
Yeah, actually, well, so now that you've mentioned that's another one of the things that's come up quite a lot, Michael, in the last few weeks, is the relationship between RevOps and go-to-market.
Mm-hmm.
Do you have like any? I mean, how would you, like, in a minute or two, how would you sort of explain the relationship between, a go-to-market motion and RevOps?
Well, let's see if I can come up with an analogy on the fly. RevOps is like the glue that makes the go-to-market team stick. So yeah, if you the go-to-market teams, it's essential to the core theme we've been talking about today. If it's those teams need to be able to connect and communicate and work together, and that includes the systems and operations. I think most importantly, the systems and operations.
Mm-hmm.
And RevOps is what enables that. So go-to-market teams, whether it be marketing, sales, services, product, that's using a product-led growth approach, they all need to communicate and work together. And as we all increasingly are knowing, data is so important to making those decisions, seeing the success, and being strategic. So invest in your RevOps team. You can have separate teams. You should have a team that's focused on marketing ops and sales ops. And there's just totally separate needs. But make sure you have an umbrella layer that is coordinating all those systems together. And that's, I think, what's called RevOps, and what really sticks the go-to-market teams together.
So with a really short analogy, or a short way to say that would be, RevOps makes go-to-market happen.
Sure. And well, yes and no, because you can make any sales team can just pick up the phone and start calling people. Marketing teams, you could just start blasting people. So like RevOps won't make it go, but it will
help it grow.
It'll help it grow. There you go, Brendan. Yes, that is it.
Grow better together.
Nailed it.
Couldn't have said it better.
Cool. Did you enjoy this episode?
Find more at RevOpsChampions.com.